Welcome back to the Darius Gant Show. I'm your host, Darius Gant, as well as founder and CEO of Tesoro AI, where we help companies to scale their AI solutions and AI teams. On this podcast, we focus on cutting-edge technology, more specifically, artificial intelligence. By getting up close and personal with the innovative founders who are building these AI applications, we learn exactly what's happening with AI in the real world and the real-world problems that artificial intelligence is solving. In this episode, we sit with the incredible Amanda Kelly, who is co-founder and COO of Streamlit. Streamlit allows you to build data applications without requiring front-end development experience. It's a fast and easy app framework for data science and machine learning. There are a lot of business folks out there who are trying to figure out how to take that expertise in business and apply it to either an AI organization or an AI project. Amanda is an excellent example of someone who leverages her expertise in business operations and applies it to an AI organization. She has led product and operations for Google and Google X projects. She was also director of operations for an AI company by the name of Zoox. You're gonna love the insights that Amanda shares here. If you or your team is considering building an AI solution, be sure to reach out to the team here at Tesoro AI. We've assembled leading experts in both machine learning and data science. We'll help you with anything from AI strategy to data labeling, AI-based software development, and even staff augmentation. So be sure to head over to www.tesoroai.com. All right, I won't hold you any longer. Let's hop into the show. Amanda, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Yes, happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, where I want to start things off is really understanding your background and when you decided to plant your roots in kind of this world of artificial intelligence and something that you wanted to pursue, as a career.
Yeah, I'll say I'm probably like a lot of people in that I could paint a good story about how I came here, but really I didn't have an overarching plan. I think that what I've always been inclined to in my career is just new challenges. And I think that's gotten me deeper into the tech world. My background really is in business. I like solving things that really haven't been solved before. And I think that AI is one of a few fronts that kind of in our lifetime is just opening up doors and creating new solutions and also new problems that we haven't faced before. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is like tackling really big, meaty problems, working with great people, and often using excellent technology to do it.
So did you start off I guess your introduction to AI, actually working with tech? What was that your experience at Google? I saw you were also at Zoox. What was your first exposure having come from the business side?
I worked at Google for a number of years, then I went back and I got my MBA, and I had an opportunity after finishing my MBA to go to Google X, which was pretty nascent in those days. And Google X was still figuring out how they were going to structure these moonshots. And so I came in as kind of a floater. They were like, you're smart, some stuff on strategy, some stuff on business, some stuff on product. Why don't you just help out a few different projects, right? And see if you can help them, because they're mostly technologists. And so one of the projects that I was assigned to was Adrian Troy's project, who's the CEO of Streamlit. And so he was working kind of in NLP at that time and had some ideas around crowdsourcing and how we could improve conversational algorithms. And I just found that fascinating. And so I joined that project full time. And Tiago was also there. He was the tech lead on the project. He's our third co-founder. So we all ran that for a couple of years at Google X, and then it graduated and got absorbed into Google. And then that's when I got really interested in autonomous vehicle technology. There's just so many things that are fascinating about autonomous vehicles. Personally, I'm just really, really excited. I'm an architecture geek at heart. I almost went into architecture, and I just love imagining what our cities can be like, right? In terms of walkability, space we get back from parking lots and garages and things like that, the way that the world is going to change with this technology. And autonomous vehicles are only one of many of these amazing technologies that I think are going to come out in the next 25 years that are fundamentally going to change the way we live. Yeah, and so I went to Zoox with that, and then Adrian had the idea for Streamlit, and that's how I ended up here today.
Yeah, so I think it'd be great to hear from you, because you've worked in big tech. some of the folks who pioneered a lot of things in AI, and Google pioneered a lot of things in AI, and have seen it from a big tech perspective. You've also seen it from a startup perspective. And now that the product that you have is really supporting people who are building AI solutions, I'm curious on your thoughts around the hype in AI. So who's really using it? Who's not? Aside, we know big tech is, right? But aside from them, like, what are you seeing in terms of non-tech environments, tech folks, startups? Where are you seeing adoption most?
Yeah, it's actually really, really interesting. So at Streamlit, we have a library, a tool that basically allows data scientists to create their own tools. So you can take anything that you've built in Python, right? Any model you build, any data that you're working on, and turn that into a tool, an application, which could be anything. And when we launched it about a year and a half ago, it was really, really interesting to start seeing the people who signed up. And it's across the board. It's Delta Dental and like health insurance, and John Deere and Milwaukee Tooling. And it's not necessarily the companies that you would necessarily think, right? I mean, there are the Ubers and the Twitters and the Googles of the world. And I think it's hard, I think, to know from the outside, right, what company is really going to, maybe have a fantastic data group. Some of them, there's some companies like the Ubers, the Stitch Fixes, like they were built in this new data world where they knew that they were going to build a company on top of that. They planned for that. They have huge data science teams. But you also find a lot of these very traditional companies that are just being very, very smart with the data that they have. And I think that really just comes down to really great, leadership, often from the CTO or the CISO suite, who just really understand the problems that they have and the way that data can help them. And they allow freedom, I think, within their data science groups and their AI groups to tackle those problems and experiment and make mistakes. But more importantly, they know how to tie that back to an actual business decision, right? So they know how to get that model or that insight, into the customer service representative's hand, right? So that they can surface a better answer to whoever's calling in, or they can get that to the marketer who's trying to decide which offer should be sent in an email to somebody who just purchased a coffee, right, at a 7-Eleven. And I think it's that kind of leadership that I think is best predicts, right, how well AI circulates within an industry or within a company.
Yeah. Very interesting. And especially the point around folks who have already figured out what the business problem is, and then coming up with this idea of, hey, I can use AI tools to enhance the solution to the problem. I'm curious, in the early days when you all were bouncing around the idea of Streamlit, what was the initial problem that you saw? What was the insight that you had where you said, we want to provide a solution to this?
Yeah, I think, funnily enough, we came out of it in two ways. And so I think that oftentimes we hope in a startup that there was like one aha moment. I think there were like 18 aha moments in the first year that kind of got to this, and at least half of them were from our users just shouting and telling us things a number of times until we understood them. But I think it was really two things. One was, especially from Thiago and Adrian, who are developers by background and have also worked in data science and machine learning, they knew that they didn't have kind of the coding tools that they wanted just personally to solve what they needed to do. They're very good developers. They're used to using state-of-the-art things. They said, I want to stay in code, but I also want to be able to live visualize and change and do things with that. So I think that was the first half of it. And that's what the core kind of Streamlit library, right? That web app and that quick refresh really gets you in terms of development. The second was an insight that really came from our users, but resonated from us in terms of the industry that we worked in, which is there's this huge gulf between I did this data work, I built this model, and now people are using it, right? And it's actually making a difference. And you go from something that's so dynamic, right? Code that can do all these things, and often that ends up in like a PowerPoint presentation, right? Or an email with a PDF attached that's like, well, let's look at this graph. I'll print it out 3 different ways. And you want that to be interactive, right? And you want that analysis to be interactive. You want that conversation to be interactive. You want that to become a tool that gets used regularly, not a one-off insight that gets done every quarter. Our data is live and our decisions, right, should be live in that same way. And we had all personally felt that frustration of sitting there being like, I know we have this algorithm that can look at things in the world, and I know I need it on this map, but I can't do it. The tools team doesn't have time to do it, right? Or I could do it if I knew Flask or something like that. And so taking that in and saying, okay, well, let's make this interactive. Let's make it easy to deploy, right? Let's make it this web app framework. That was really the second half. And yeah, and putting that all together is now where Streamlit is today.
So I guess if I'm a developer, how easy is it what level of knowledge do I have to have of data science, machine learning, or even code to be able to effectively use Streamlit?
I think effectively is the asterisk here, but I would say, I use Streamlit all the time, and I have no formal coding. I taught myself Python, and when I made all of our initial kind of data tools. So it is very, very easy to get started. Now, as you probably know, with any data work or modeling work, it's also any coding work, it's also very easy just to mess up just in terms of coding type things. So I think that creating the really complex tools does require more advanced, maybe Python skills. But in terms of taking some data code, taking a model and turning it quickly into an app that others can use, it's actually very, very easy and accessible.
And generally when folks are using Streamlit, is it that they have a data set maybe from their internal organization? Are they pulling in public data? What do they start with before they can actually get in and effectively leverage the platform?
Yeah, so I think most people are coming into Streamlit already having something they want to build. So we get a lot of students and researchers who are working with public data, and they say, I have this insight or I have this analysis, and now I want to share it, right? Present it in some way, and they use Streamlit for that. I think for our users that are coming more from the corporate environment, it really is a need that they're getting from their internal stakeholders. So their product team has come to them and they say, I need a way to do a cohort analysis on this specific group of users and slice it these few different ways. And they're taking that and they're saying, well, let me just expose this within a tool so they can do, most of the work themselves, or they can find their own insights, and then we can collaborate on that live and make it better. Because even in the best world, and as a former product manager myself, right, you're never going to be able to fully articulate everything you're thinking and knowing. And I think that's one of the beauties of, instead of producing a report, right, or just code, producing an actual app that somebody can interact with and learn with. You just, you understand so much more. You're able to put so much more of your own insight into it, and becomes a much more robust collaboration.
So one of the things that I found, very interesting about artificial intelligence, the market in general, is you get a lot of excitement. I won't call it hype. I'll call it excitement. And so as a startup, you have to find product market fit and differentiate between excitement and, hey, listen, I'm going to put money towards using this solution. And so I'm curious, as you all thought about go to market, how did that look initially? What were some of the levers or the approaches that you took, and did it change over time?
Well, I'll have to say we're only partway through this, so we're going to have to redo this podcast in a few years, and I'll let you know. But, the core Streamlit is open source, right? And so we made the decision about 1.5 years ago that we wanted it to be open source. We wanted it to be available, people to use it however they want. So that is absolutely free. We make no money off of that. Often we don't even know, right, if you're using it. What we found is that we made it very, very easy for people to create apps, and you can go ahead and deploy that yourself. If you know how to put it in a Docker container and go ahead and host it yourself and maintain it, you can do all that work. But most people don't want to do that kind of DevOps work, or they don't have the skills to do it. And so what we're launching next year, what we call Streamlit for Teams, is a collaboration platform that's around deploying, managing, sharing, collaborating on the apps that you have with Streamlit. And that's something that so far we found people are happy to pay for, because that is a very real need, and it's also a very real pain that most people don't want to handle.
Yeah. Now, did you start off with an initial hypothesis and say, hey, listen, this would be an application that startups are going to love because they would love to deploy AI applications? And then maybe that changes, maybe that doesn't. But I'm curious if there was a direct market segment that you attacked first, and was there a pivot? And the reason I ask is because there's always this initial idea, these assumptions that we have for who would be the best users for our product. And then the users come back the people we want to be users come back and tell us differently, right?
I think that we didn't have a great idea probably for the first year or so that we were doing it. We were working with a number of developers, and we knew we had something there, but we didn't really know what the go-to-market was going to be, right? We were still in beta. And so when we made the decision to open source it in the fall of 2019, we knew it was going to be an open core. We knew we were going to try to monetize around the people that kind of wanted us to host, deploy, and manage the apps for them, though there's a lot of kind of nuance in there. And we were really initially targeting a lot of the machine learning AI group. And we found a lot of resonance there, but also it really took off around the broader data science community, right? And analysts, even people who were in data roles in more in sales and kind of marketing, because it is so easy to use. So we actually have a very kind of broad market at this point, but I think that we've really solidified around generally a core data science team. This is a platform that they can use and they can work on together. But I think that there's a lot. If we have this conversation in a few years, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about new products or lines or that we have that are more focused on the marketers, the product managers, people who are interacting with these tools, but not necessarily the ones creating it. At heart, we're always going to be a developer.
Yeah, you know what I found really interesting, and we talked about this a little before, is that even, and I think your freemium model, open source model enables this, but folks who are, they're not even working yet, but they're trying to fine tune their skills so that they can have some projects to show, look, I know what I'm doing. I can be a machine learning engineer. They're building, their applications on Streamlit. And I think that's a very interesting thing, because now they become very comfortable with how to use the platform, excited about the platform. They go work at that company. And it's kind of like, oh, they can talk to the product manager or whoever. Like, hey, we need to use Teams. So that kind of organic word of mouth growth, I think, is pretty interesting, and something that I saw just in some of the conversations that I had seen through some of my networks. Now, how did you all, I guess, from the early days, did you raise funding? Did you join an accelerator? How did the early days look in terms of capital to get started?
We were very lucky in that I think we were oversubscribed on the first day of our seed round, and Gradient Ventures led that, and then they were also a co-lead in our Series A. And so, yeah, we were able to raise a good amount of capital early in our seed, and then also in our Series A last year with Gradient and GGV Capital co-leading that. And yeah, there's a number of other kind of angel investors and also strategic ones that bought in at smaller amounts, both in the seed and in the Series A. And it's just a fantastic group that's really been a great brain trust for us in terms of both how to think about both the data science and the AI community, but also the broader, how do you actually grow a business around open source and make it something that's both good for the community, but also good for the company.
Now, did you, and I imagine they had some sense of what you all were trying to accomplish, but coming from the investment world myself, there was a ton of hype around AI, right? Less folks who actually knew what it is. So did you run into that during the fundraising process, and did you decide to focus on some folks who saw the greater vision for what you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah, 100%. I think especially in the seed, we chose investors, and Anna Patterson over at GGV, she was someone we knew from Google and we're very confident from. She had run kind of an ML group, and she got it. We had an early demo that we could show, and they were like, I get this because I've developed before, right? I understand it. Okay. And I think that a lot of the investors who had people who actually coded in Streamlit, or like there were a number of investors who were like, my data science team has used this. Okay. And so that was both a good sign to us, right? That they're probably the type of partner that we want to do. Yes, but also we really chose for people who were like, we're in it for the long haul. And you really have to be, I think, in these kind of open source, open core companies, because you are trying to go very broad. And that's not a strategy that necessarily pays off in 6 months or 1 year. It's not necessarily the standard playbook. So especially in our Series A, we were looking for both people and capital groups that had experience with open source, because it is a very different kind of business model. And yes, there were absolutely people who did not get that, or did not get the technology and And so those were shorter conversations.
Yeah, I'm always interested in how founders think through that, because they're always going to be, everyone's going to be interested. Well, I don't want to say everyone. If you have something good, folks will be interested, but certain folks have a set investment criteria. And so while you may have the conversation and it feels like it could go far, ultimately, if you don't fit in that investment criteria, unless you help change their investment thesis, it's probably not going to be the best match. So another question for you. You started with this core of 3 founders. All of you came from or met at Google, if I'm not mistaken. How did you think about that next hire that you were going to make? What need did you have where you said, look, us 3, we're doing a great job. Here's the next person that's going to solve a serious issue that we have in the company?
I think that the first 2 people that came on were just good engineers that we knew, right, kind of through network. And then the next person was someone that I had worked with at Zoox, who'd also been a Googler. And he honestly, he just called me up and he said, I don't know exactly what you're doing, but he'd worked with myself and also Adrian. And he's a great generalist. And he was like, I just want to work with you guys. And so we were like, okay, well, I don't know what you're going to do, but why don't you come on 10 hours a week? And then it became 20 hours a week, and then it became 40. And now he runs like all of our product marketing. And I think that's not uncommon in some early startup days, that you just rely heavily on network and you hope you find people. And I think that at every startup, you'll find that it's generally best you have to hire a number of generalists right at first, or at least people who can jump around and wear a lot of hats, because it just changes every week. Whenever we hire people, even today, I say, the only thing I can guarantee you is that what I put on your 30, 60, 90 plan will not be what you do. Right? The first 2 weeks I can probably predict pretty well, and then you're going to do it. But part of that is because, for better or for worse, when you're operating, especially with a few people, you really functionally have blinders on. You're just like, what's bleeding right now? Like, what are the next 2 things we need to get done? And so oftentimes you're undervaluing or not even seeing the complexity of certain other functions or things you might be doing. And then you get somebody in who's focused on that, and they're like, oh my goodness, you told me this was a 5-hour project, and there's 500 things here that need to be done. And you go from thinking that you needed a 1 part-time contractor to like, oh my goodness, this is a team of 4. And that's where we are, I think, right now as a company, in terms of really starting to specialize in terms of things. But we all still wear a lot of hats, and we look for people who can run quickly, do a lot of things, and just prioritize really well.
Yeah, it sounds like, for now, at least, the folks who fit best with Streamlit are folks who can be, or at least willing to be, a jack of all trades, right? Or at least willing to dive in. Look, here's an issue. It's not my job, but I'll take I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. I'll come back to you next week with a solution, right?
Yep.
And one of the things I'm also interested about is, because you're building a product that can be for an individual or a team, right? Not necessarily like today, an enterprise level product where you're going in, you're meeting with a CEO or some management level person. I'm curious, how do you approach getting feedback on the product, and how does that, have you created processes for that?
Yeah, that has been incredibly important, right, from the very earliest days of Streamlit. I mean, I think we had it in the hands of a few beta users within a month after having kind of our seed funding, because it is really, really important to us to get that feedback. And so we've continued that even as we've grown. So one thing is that we have a forum, discuss.streamlit.io, that's very, very active. And so pretty much for anything that we're putting out, we'll put a notice on there, hey, who wants to be, part of the beta for this? And that's a way that we get early feedback on things. We also have a nightly branch that we released earlier this year, so that people can get on and they can see and they can give us feedback. We've also curated a group of people over the last couple of years. So we have a program we call the Streamlit Creators Program. So these are people who, what do other people call it? I mean, I think Twilio
like evangelists, or?
Yeah, they're part evangelists, but they're people who they've done a lot. Like, they're often on the forum, they're giving great feedback, or they're talking to us. And so that's the group that we're very active with. We meet with them on a regular basis. They're the first to get any idea. They even weigh in sometimes in the design docs. So we're constantly, every quarter we add a couple individuals to that. And we also have a number of people also on the corporate side who've just been really great in terms of giving us that feedback. And they're always willing to get, on the phone with us and talk to us about things. I think those are the areas. And I think that the main thing that I've learned in the past year is that most people are really, really happy to give feedback or jump on that call. And I find that's true for myself as well. If it's the tool I love, it's the person I like, I'm always happy to make half an hour and give my opinions, because who really doesn't love giving their opinions? And oftentimes when I thank people and I say, hey, can we send you something or whatever? And they're like, no, like I'm just so happy to be, I would love to do more because I love your tool so much. So I think that, if you're another startup founder out there and you're worried about bothering some of your people, don't be, right? If they're big fans of yours, I think they're going to be happy to jump on the phone with you and give you some feedback.
Yeah, that's some interesting insight. And now that I think about it, some of these podcasting is becoming a bigger thing these days. And so then you got platforms that are creating tools that podcasters can use. And there was one particular company I was checking out, and they asked me, you did the trial, but you never converted. But I thought what they're doing is awesome. It was just one specific feature where I'm like, if you had this feature, I would have done it. And I was more than happy to give my feedback, because I'm like, look, I want to write you this check for the product, but I need you to put that feature in. So to your point, if you like the product, it's kind of like, look, you're helping me by adding some of the things that I saw could be an error, I should say. Your background, as you mentioned, more business side, strategy side. I'd love to hear from you as the COO of Streamlit. What are your daily responsibilities? And the reason I have this in mind is that because potentially there are a ton of folks, right, who are on the business side, don't necessarily know how to code, haven't spent a lot of time figuring out how to train AI models, but do want to get either into the industry or figure out how to be in the position you are, where they're a co-founder of a company that sits within this AI space.
Yeah. Well, no 2 days look alike. And I think of all the kind of C-level or executive positions, COO probably varies the most from company to company in terms of what that actually means. So take this with a grain of salt. But at Streamlit, so we have VP of engineering, right? We have our CEO, who focuses on all things like that, but also helps a lot on the product side. And then my co-founder, Tiago, he heads up, right, all of product. So I basically do everything that is not that, right? Okay. So that's, people in my org work across sales, marketing, finance, back office, data science, general operations. But then we also, work very closely often with engineering and product on things. So we work very closely as an executive team, because we all bring different insights, right, into how something needs to be launched, or what order, or what kind of importance that might have. And the thing I think that I bring, and then I can tell you exactly what my Mondays look like if you want. Okay. But I think the thing that I bring is, when you look at these McKinsey graphs of like, well, where is AI going to add value in the next 10 years? All these billions of dollars or trillions of dollars that AI is going to bring, where's it going to come from? It's 3 areas. It's marketing, sales, and operations. That's where it's going. And if that isn't absorbed into marketing, sales, and operations, you're not getting that benefit. Your clients aren't getting that benefit. And who understands how to make decisions in the marketing and sales and operations? Well, hopefully you, right? If you're wearing that COO hat. And so that's the value that I often provide, of like, well, we can be really great on this side, but if nobody ever, you can make the world's best tool, but if nobody ever uses that tool, then they're not going to pay us $1 for it, right? It's not going to be impactful. And so making sure that we bridge that divide, and then we go, into other areas. That's how my org can really help, I think, especially inform product decisions or things that we might want to do on the engineering side. But I think at a startup, you as a COO are just basically going to devolve to, you're going to be the generalist of all generalists, right? In terms of trying to clear the path for the CEO, the product team, the engineering team. So anything that falls through the cracks is you or your org in terms of it. So that time where all the toilets got clogged up at the office back in the office, that's whose job it was to figure that out, right? Right. So it is everything from figuring out what our benefits should be for 2021 to how are we going to grow our recruiting team and attract and retain the best talent, to figuring out how we're going to accept a payment in Cambodian baht, right? For people who want to pay there, to growing out the leadership in the orgs, in sales, in marketing, in community, in data science, to make sure, right, that all of those are going and that our go-to-market operations are strong. And
you mentioned your typical Monday. What's that look like?
Well, my Monday is actually a lot of meetings right now. We have a company meeting. It probably starts with emails, and I have, again, that could be anything from our recruiting agencies to, I'm the face for a lot of our customers, and so, fielding requests and things from them, people who want a job, people speaking opportunities, and then it's a lot of kind of meeting with my team. So I often tell my team, my job basically is to think long and to think wide so you can go deep, right? And so I'm here to basically be a sounding board, so you can say, I think I need to do this and this, and I can say, actually, I know this thing is happening on the product side of the world, and maybe we should switch those priorities, or maybe you should talk to this person, or actually we're gonna need to sequence this out because something else is coming down the line. That's my favorite role, is being a thought partner and just helping my team do more and helping them think a bit more strategically about how their work can have more impact in the org.
Yeah, and I think the point you made, look, you can have the best product in the world, but if it's not actually solving a pain point, and if you're not connecting with the right market, the right customers, it's not going to go anywhere. And I've seen folks just had candy conversations like, look, I've been so heads down, founders, I've been so heads down on building the product. I took my eye off the sales, took my eye off the marketing, and now I gotta ramp up that piece. And as amazing as the tech is that you can build, I think, and the IP that you can have around that, I also believe there's IP that you should have around how you sell, right? So, if in the end of the day, what you can patent, what you have IP on, it's only protected by the process, but someone else could figure out how to get to the same end result as you. But ultimately, if you can sell better, if you understand your market better, those things, a lot of things that go into that, but could have a big have a large weight on whether you're successful or not. So love that you made that point. Want to be conscious of time here, so I do have a couple more questions for you. One is, and I'm glad you get to see the entire organization, because this question I have is, what is your favorite tool to use inside of the organization?
We're a Notion company, and our CEO is one of the bigger Notion kind of fanboys, and I have more slowly fallen in love with Notion, but I do really love it. And I think, to your point, it's funny, I was reading an end-of-year CEO survey the other day about what are CEOs most concerned about, or biggest org, and basically it's every year it trades places where their people are more worried in some ways about or attracting top talent, or their internal processes. And I think that's just like, it's true no matter the size of your company. It's just which talent or which processes are you talking about in terms of doing it. And I think that in terms of making a company go, we love Notion for just being a knowledge base that we can point people to and that helps structure thoughts. We used to be a primary kind of local company where you could just pull somebody into a room and whiteboard something and then be like, great, you do this, I do that, go. When we use spreadsheets, we use things like Asana to coordinate stuff, but when we made the decision to be really a remote first company and to really hire everywhere, we had to shift a lot of our decision-making structure and our knowledge structure. We have people in so many different time zones. The time that we have together in terms of meetings and stuff, you have to make sure things are well documented and that people can run in different ways. And so we use Notion for that, as well as choice meetings, and a few other kind of tips and tricks to make sure that people are coordinated. But yeah, that would be my favorite tool from the COO side, at least.
Yeah, it sounds like Notion is taking off. I'm hearing really good feedback on Notion from several different founders. Which made me sign up recently. Okay, second question is, someone either in AI or in business who you follow or who inspires you?
Oh, that's a good question. not sure I'm going to have a great answer off the top of my head. I think the very truthful answer is that I am generally a very heads down person. I'm not on social media. I read a lot, but it's from varying kind of groups of authors. And so I think that I tend to glean and pick up little pieces of information and things there and there versus very targeted things. But maybe I'll just give a shout out to my two co-founders, Tiago and Adrian, who are both very, very smart people. And also our board members, Anna Patterson, Glenn Solomon. They've all been my biggest thought partners. And I think that one of the great benefits of a good VC firm is the network that they introduce you to. One of the great things is I'll come to them with a problem and I'll just be like, I'm not really sure what finance tooling I should be setting up, right, for the next year. And they're like, great, here are 4 people that I can introduce you to tomorrow. And they're all happy to talk to me. And so that's generally been my method. It's not necessarily that one person, but every time I come up with a problem, I ask my co-founders, I ask our board and our advisors, who can you introduce me to who's probably gone through this problem before? Then I have 3 or 4 kind of pointed conversations, usually within a 1 to 2 week range. I summarize it all and I'm like, okay, it's Stripe, or okay, we don't have to hire this thing now. We can push this out 6 months or whatever it is. That's generally been my method for working.
Yeah, that has to be like a secret weapon for you, like just having to choose so many different tools, so many different processes. If it's like, look, I don't want to experiment for 3 months and then figure out it was the wrong way to go. Let me talk to someone who's been there, done that.
Yeah, and I think that we're lucky to have a great network through that, but I think that almost certainly whoever's listening to this, you have that too in some way through kind of the people you already have in your network, just if you ask. And don't be afraid to ask your manager, your executive, to introduce you to people in their network as well. I think it's an introduction is generally a very easy thing to make. And again, like, I think you would be surprised the number of people who are willing to give you 30 minutes of your time. And you don't, in the past, I think I have been very reluctant to use someone's time if I don't feel like I have very, very pointed questions to ask them. But I don't think it takes a lot. It's just, you can go to somebody with, what are the top 5 things you were focusing on when you were at my stage? What do you think I should be thinking on now? And you'll get a lot of great advice, and you can just start a lot of conversations that way.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, super helpful, Amanda. Thank you for taking time to chat with us, provide us with your insights. For folks who want to find out more about Streamlit, where do we go? Where do we find you?
Yeah, streamlit.io. Just check out our website or just Google Streamlit, right? We're at the top of there. Come by the forum, come say hi, tweet at us. We have a very active community. We would love to talk to you. Yeah, and learn more about what you're up to.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Amanda. And we'll, like you said, we'll have to have you back soon for an update.
Yes.